Jack London remains an iconic architect of the American literary landscape, yet his life was defined by a profound and jarring internal contradiction that haunted his every waking moment of creative output. Born into the crushing poverty of the Gilded Age, London transformed his brutal experiences as a sailor, hobo, and prospector into a pioneering form of literary naturalism that captured the human spirit. His works, such as The Call of the Wild, established a rugged Western mythology rooted deeply in Darwinian struggle and the primal, unyielding desire for survival against the harshness of the elements. However, this immense literary genius was constantly shadowed by the toxic ideologies of his early upbringing. Raised by a nativist mother, he absorbed deep-seated racial prejudices that would linger for many years. Even as he was nurtured by Jenny Prentice, a black woman who provided the genuine affection his mother withheld, the seeds of his internal conflict were already sown within his young mind. This early environment created a man who could simultaneously advocate for radical socialist equality for the day, working class while endorsing the exclusionary, pseudo-scientific racism that permeated the intellectual climate of the era. He walked a razor-thin line between his public political advocacy and his private inherited belief systems. The dissonance between his socialist ideals and his racial views defined his complex, often troubled personality. His writings reflected this duality, blending empathy for the oppressed with the cold, detached Darwinian logic. London was a product of his time, yet he struggled to transcend the boundaries of prejudice. The tension between his upbringing and his observations of the world created a constant, gnawing friction. He sought to understand the world through the lens of struggle, yet he ignored human equality. His life became a battleground where competing ideologies fought for dominance over his brilliant, restless intellect. This intellectual conflict set the stage for a lifetime of contradiction that would eventually define him. He was a man caught between the light of his empathy and the darkness of dogma. Every story he penned carried the weight of this struggle, echoing his own internal, unresolved battles. The Gilded Age provided the backdrop for his rise, but it also shackled his moral development. He navigated the complexities of his identity with a ferocity that matched his characters in fiction. The paradox of London was not merely a flaw, but the very engine of his art. He was a pioneer of naturalism who could not escape the nature of his own upbringing. His life serves as a stark reminder of how deeply early environments shape our adult perceptions. The influence of Jenny Prentice offered a glimpse of a different, more inclusive world for him. Yet, the nativist rhetoric of his mother remained a stubborn ghost in his complex, evolving mind. He stood at the crossroads of history, embodying the contradictions of a nation in rapid transition. This brings us to the core dialectical tension that defined the very essence of his existence. It was a stark clash between his political ideals for equality and his heavily prejudiced rhetoric. As someone who analyzes literature for a living, I find this to be his most jarring contradiction. On one hand, London genuinely and radically advocated for the working class and the poor. He was heavily influenced by Karl Marx and wrote these deeply empathetic exposes like The Abyss. Yet, at the exact same time, he endorsed exclusionary and pseudo-scientific theories of social Darwinism. He wrote pieces that promoted white supremacy and warned of the so-called yellow peril constantly. He was literally holding two entirely incompatible worldviews in his mind at the same time. This cognitive dissonance was not merely a side effect, but a central feature of his work. He could write with profound compassion about the suffering of the London dock workers in poverty. Simultaneously, He would pen essays that stripped dignity from other cultures based on racial hierarchies. It is a haunting reminder that intellectual brilliance does not guarantee immunity from societal bigotry. His readers are left to reconcile the man who championed the underdog with the man who promoted the very systems of oppression that he claimed to despise in his socialist political writings. This duality creates a friction that makes his body of work both fascinating and deeply problematic. We see the struggle in his prose, where empathy battles with the cold, hard logic of the survival of the fittest, creating a narrative voice that is both compelling and deeply flawed. His life was a testament to the messy, unresolved nature of human progress and moral evolution. He was a man who saw the future of class warfare with incredible, sharp, and chilling precision. Yet, he remained shackled by the outdated, narrow-minded racial categories of the 19th century's dying days. This internal war was never fully won, but it provided the fuel for his creative output. He wrote to resolve these tensions, yet he often found himself trapped by his own contradictions. The clash of socialism and racism was not just an academic debate for Jack London today. It was the lived reality of a man who could not reconcile his heart with his mind. His legacy remains a mirror for our own struggles with the prejudices of our current era. We look at him and see the potential for growth alongside the persistence of deep ignorance. His life forces us to confront the uncomfortable reality that heroes are rarely simple or perfect. They are complex, evolving, and often deeply contradictory figures who reflect the times they inhabit. London's work remains essential because it captures this struggle in its most raw, honest form. Ultimately, he remains a figure of intense study, representing the best and worst of humanity. The evolution of London's worldview serves as a testament to the power of lived experience, demonstrating how genuine human contact can slowly dismantle the most deeply ingrained and toxic dogma. While his dystopian masterpiece, The Iron Heel, displayed a chillingly accurate foresight regarding the rise of global fascism and the mechanics of capitalist oppression, his personal growth was equally radical. Through his extensive travels, particularly his long, transformative voyages across the vast South Pacific, London began to move beyond the narrow colonial propaganda that had defined the youth of his early life, slowly peeling away the layers of prejudice he had once so blindly accepted. His photography and his intimate, genuine friendships with diverse individuals, such as the legendary boxer Jack Johnson and his devoted adopted son Yoshimatsu Nakata, forced him to confront the reality of his own biases, eventually compelling him to reject his earlier, rigid, white supremacist frameworks. These relationships were not merely casual encounters, but were profound catalysts for his internal transformation, challenging him to see the humanity in those he had been taught to view differently. By the end of his short, tumultuous life, London had transitioned from a vocal proponent of nativism to an increasingly passionate champion of ethnic harmony and universal human dignity everywhere. His legacy is not one of perfection, nor is it one of moral consistency throughout, but rather one of a rare, defiant capacity for genuine, humanistic growth and intellectual change. He proved that even a deeply flawed mind, burdened by the heavy weight of history, can evolve through authentic, empathetic engagement with the complex and beautiful world around him today. The contradictions that once fueled his internal conflict eventually gave way to a broader understanding, marking the final chapter of a man who constantly sought truth in the wild unknown. London's journey reflects the universal struggle to overcome the shadows cast by our own upbringing, showing that growth is possible even when the roots of prejudice run incredibly deep indeed. He remains a mirror of the American experience, reflecting both its darkest impulses and its brightest, most hopeful potential for change. As he navigated the turbulent waters of his era, his life stands as a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to learn, to adapt, and to eventually transcend the limitations imposed by a fractured, divided society. As he looked out over the Pacific, he saw not just subjects for his stories, but fellow travelers on a shared path toward a more inclusive and understanding global future. The man who wrote of survival in the frozen North finally found his own salvation in the warmth of human connection, leaving behind a legacy of profound and lasting transformation. This transformation was not sudden, but a slow, deliberate erosion of his early, rigid indoctrination. He documented his changing perspective through his lens, capturing dignity where others saw only difference. His photographs of indigenous peoples remain a vital, historical record of his evolving, empathetic vision. They stand in stark contrast to the dehumanizing imagery that dominated the media of his time. London chose to see the individual, the person, and the soul beneath the surface of culture. This shift allowed him to reconcile his radical socialist politics with a growing, universal humanism. He moved past the narrow confines of his upbringing to embrace a much wider world. His later years were marked by a conscious effort to bridge the gaps between divided communities. He understood that his own voice carried weight and used it to advocate for harmony. The contradictions of his life are not flaws to be hidden, but lessons to be studied. They reveal the immense, often painful effort required to grow beyond one's own cultural limitations. London's life was a constant, restless search for a truth that transcended his early, biased teachings. He lived with a fire that burned through his own prejudices and his own internal barriers. His legacy is a complex, living thing that continues to challenge us to do better today. We see in him the capacity for change that defines the very best of human nature. He was a man who lived fully, embracing the chaos of existence with a fierce intensity. His words still echo with the urgency of a man who fought to understand his world. He remains a figure of immense fascination because he was never afraid to be wrong. He was never afraid to change his mind when faced with the truth of experience. This willingness to evolve is perhaps his most enduring and important contribution to our culture. It reminds us that our past does not have to dictate the trajectory of our future. We can learn, we can grow, and we can eventually transcend our own deepest, darkest flaws. London's story is a call to action for all of us to remain open to change. It is a reminder that the world is far more complex than our early lessons suggest. By engaging with the world with an open heart, we too can find our own salvation. His life was a bridge between the old, divided world and a more hopeful, unified future. His life, though short, remains a beacon for those seeking to overcome their own limitations. May we all possess the courage to grow as he did, through experience and truth. Jack London, the man of contradictions, remains a vital, evolving part of our shared history.
Thank you.